Good morning. Today I was just thinking about, wanted to mention some things, especially a person. This book, The Old Paths, written by Dr. Dennis Corll. It's a great book. I think it's one of his newer books, I think. It's one of the newer ones I got from him. And when he was at our church recently, I know quite a few people picked it up. And this is just a simple reminder of who we are and where we came from. Chapter 1, the old paths. Chapter 2, are you going in or going back? The need to continue, buy the truth and sell it not. How's your walk with God? Where to find pleasure? Are you in the yoke? And removing out the ancient landmarks, redigging our father's wells. They're just 15 chapters, just real thorough. And of course, like most of his material, it's just filled with scripture. And I want to recommend this book. If you haven't got it, it'll remind you of who we are and where we came from, and by God's grace, where we intend to go. Brother Corll first crossed our path. I'm going to say it was in 1984, maybe 1985. Our church was very young, and another church was having him into the area, and so we merged. Our church very young, another church younger yet, and then another church that had been around for a while. And we had a meeting. We prayed. We met once a month, different people from the three churches, and we just took time on a Sunday. I want to say it was a Sunday night, but I can't remember for sure. But it might have been a Saturday night. But we took time to pray together and pray for God's blessing. Well, we prayed, and then when the meeting came, we fasted, and I fasted. I don't know what anybody else did, but it was a 12-day meeting. We started on a Wednesday night and went through Sunday and Wednesday into the next Sunday. And Brother Corll's the numbers person, I'm not, but because he's reminded me, but we had something like 150 people baptized, converts baptized, and it was a great meeting, but not just a great meeting those 12 days, but it helped set the tone of our church for soul winning and preaching and altar calls and decisions. And we've got to get our course set. And there's some things God did. I was not wise and prudent in planning it, but one of the things that helped set our course was Dr. Dennis Corll. And then another thing that helped set our course was the John Marshall family. And it was a couple of more years, I don't know when, 6, 7 years into the church when I met them. But the John Marshall family, they kind of helped set the tone for our music. And it was just great between Ron Hamilton, Patch the Pirate, and the John Marshall family. That set the course. We have still not wavered from that type of music, old-fashioned hymns, godly music, where the lyrics and the harmony and melody are the driving factor, not the beat. Where the people who sang with respect. They looked godly. I'm baffled at churches that put people on the platform singing or leading singing, and they look like people out of the world. They look like people who'd be doing a secular concert, and sometimes the music is the same. My wife and I stumbled across a song the other day. It was online, but it was a group of men singing, and it was fairly decent sounding, but we kept listening to think, is that a Christian song or not? And it wasn't a church service. It was just a song that a group of guys was singing. And I thought, I think that's a Christian song. But no one wonders that about the John Marshall family. No one wonders that about Ron Hamilton and Patch the Pirate. And so the music, the tone of music was set, the sound. But it was the whole ambiance. It was the appearance, the appearance of godliness, not worldliness, in opposition to worldliness. These old paths, where the person who stood up to sing, as they walked to the platform, you knew they were not going to sing Nashville, and they were not going to sing Motown or some worldly style of music. Since then, of course, the contemporary church movement came to being. In those days, there was the charismatic movement, and the Pentecostals had shifted into the charismatic, and there was everything from tongues talking and all kinds of crazy things. But it all died out, of course, and the worldly churches need trends. You know, you had for a while we had the purpose-driven church, and boy, that was we got to have a purpose-driven marriage, a purpose-driven church, and that's all gone. See, those are trends. Those are things that sell books. Those are things that make you popular. But you have to get a new trend because that trend gets old. See, when our ministry and our philosophies are based on this old 1611, we don't need new things. We just keep on doing what we've always done. This book is always refreshing. This book is always fulfilling. This book and the preaching of this book is always reaching into the heart of man and changing souls, changing lives, winning souls. Well, Dennis Corr came along, and he's been at our church many times over the years, and he's a blessing to us, and we're very thankful for his influence, thankful for his books, thankful for his preaching, and thankful for his friendship, and I'm honored. But some of the things that God did in those early days, one, of course, was Brother Coral and the John Marshall family, Ron Hamilton. And in 1982, when we started our church, Ron Hamilton's ministry was very, very early. The Marshall family's ministry was very early, and they're just some wonderful things. Then God brought some people, like one after another, across our path. Howard Jewell. And Howard Jewell, I don't have time to talk about him, but he was amazing. He had traveled with people like Billy Sunday in that era of evangelists and revivalists, and he was old when we met him. He was old, but boy, could he sing and testify. And but it was old time Christianity, and it was the whole air, and it was fun. His singing was fun. He made people laugh and cry and happy. And he wouldn't preach, but he was an exhorter. He said, well, that just meant he preached in between his songs. But we were able to have Joe Boyd with us, and in those early days. And of course, Tom Williams just recently went to heaven. Dr. Williams has been with us many times. He was with us in our first tent, which would have been from about our 5th to 6th year, maybe 7th year. So that first tent we got from Brother Coral, it was old and in storage, and he gave it to us, and we didn't have it up. But that next winter, the storm came and just tore it to shreds. But we used the poles for the next tent, so we didn't have to buy the poles. But Tom Williams was in that tent when a big chunk of the tent blew out, and we just moved people over, and rain poured in, and he just kept on preaching. But we were so blessed to have had intimate relationship with these men around our 5th to 7th, maybe 7th, 8th anniversary, somewhere in there. Maybe, I don't know exactly when. I didn't take notes on any of the things back then, but it was at the 7th anniversary at the latest. Dr. Hiles came out, and Brother Hiles came out year after year and preached at our church, had great meetings, and he was a friend, he was a help. But person after person, Dr. Jim Rushing came many times to our church, and Brother Hiles introduced us to Jim Rushing, and Jim Rushing was tied to the old time, Bible-believing, separated, soul-winning Christianity, straight as an arrow. And what a pleasure, Jim Rushing. He was a friend. He and Dr. Hiles put the two together for about 20 years, just helped keep us on track. And today, of course, as the years have traveled, we've had difficulties and pressures and burdens. The devil fights any good any of God's work is going to be faced with satanic attacks, and there have been financial difficulties and health problems and land, and I mean the work of the ministry. And Paul said, "I've fought a good fight. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith." That didn't seem like a very big deal when I first got saved, but now after almost 45 years in the ministry, I'm thinking that's pretty amazing. He kept at it all the way to the end. And of course, that's my desire. But all that to say that as I grew older, and as the older men went off the scene, Tom Williams just recently going to heaven, it's a it's a little empty spot in my world because I have always put myself under an older man, an older preacher, and I've always allowed proven men to be my counselors, and in a lot of cases, just they're out there, I'm here, and I'm following in their path. I didn't bother them a lot, nor did they intrude trying to tell me what to do, but they were that North Star, excuse me, they were that North Star that that kept me and kept our church philosophically right, and that's a key. But I wanted to take a moment, with all that being said, and mention a couple of scriptures. And nobody's perfume. I'm alone here. But Proverbs 28:26. He that trusteth in his own heart is a fool, but whoso walketh wisely shall be delivered. This thing of trusting in our own heart, foolish thing to do. There's definitely a curse on these few minutes this morning. I learned early on to trust godly older men. When I came to this town, there was a deacon in our home church. I'd worked for him some, and he'd grown up in Lake Elsinore, which is the town just 2 or 3 miles to the north of us. And he's the one that kept urging me to come here to start a church, and series of events put me here. One was the president of our college. I was a missions major planning to go to Europe. And he said, we talked, and he said, I don't think you can do it. And I wasn't offended. I said, what do you think I can do? He said, find some little nowhere in America where no one's ever done anything and see what God will do with you there, and then make your decision. And I think maybe I was a young Christian. I was wanting to go to Frankfurt, Stockholm, Paris, somewhere, a European metropolis. And there was no one who'd done it. It's not like I could have gone and worked with somebody. Whatever the reason, it was an old man, and he was very old. He's a lot younger than I am now, but he was an old man to a guy who's 24. He's the one who directed me. I went to our pastor, Dr. Jack Hiles, talked to him about it. And Brother Hiles said, great idea. He said, and that's when I told him this area from the deacon in our home church who'd grown up here. He said, good area. I know that area. There's not anybody doing anything. Go there. So it was the council of 3 older men that got us here. I get here, and the man in Northern California who had been kind of nudging me to go here met his dad, and his dad was old. His dad was in his 70s, which is awful young right now, but back when I was 24, 70s is pretty old. And Lake Elsinore had 10,000 people. Wildomar had 1,000 people. And so I'm looking around Lake Elsinore for a building to rent, to start a church. I had no support, didn't have a dime. And he said, oh, no, Bruce, go to Wildomar. And I said, Wildomar? There's hardly anybody in Lake Elsinore. There's no one in Wildomar. But I listened and rented the Wildomar school for 6 weeks. That's where we started. And I can tell you that step by step by step, older men, wiser men have guided me in the way. And I'm watching many churches turning sideways as they follow their contemporaries. They all know the story of Rehoboam and how he listened to his contemporaries instead of the counselors of his father, and how he split the kingdom and made a big mess of things. And yet these young men keep doing it. It would be a rare sermon I've listened to of anybody that's my age or younger. Now, as I've gotten into my 60s, I have a few times, but not much. I grew up through my preaching years, through these years here, 42 years here at our church. I listened to preaching all the time, but it's all men that would be my parents' age or older. Dr. Lee Robertson came here, and men like him that were seasoned and time-tested. The books I have sought out good books of older men, and then I've sought out the books that older men read. And I've got reprints of books back to the 1700s. And these things, why? Because I want to keep those old paths. I want to keep the things, I want to stay on a straight course. And so that's what he says in Proverbs 28:26, don't trust your own heart. Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, lean not to thine own understanding. Proverbs 8:33, hear instruction and be wise and refuse it not. Solomon keeps urging his son and the reader to listen to wise counsel, to listen to older counsel. Proverbs 12:15, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. It's amazing to me the number of young men who have gone out of our church into the ministry on the foreign field as well as here in America, and how rarely I would get a call saying, how should I handle this, especially delicate things that are decisive in charting their course. Where I won their parents to Christ, and through me or someone in our church, they get saved, and then they get trained, and they surrender to the ministry, and then they're serving God as an assistant or a missionary or a school teacher or a pastor somewhere, and they make life decisions where they nor their parents would even be on their way to heaven were it not for this old-fashioned, fundamental, independent, separated, King James Bible, soul-winning church. And these, of course, that's what we believe independent Baptists are all about. I'm not going to call anybody up and say, why do you do this or what's wrong with you? It's none of my business. People who have gotten in the ministry and out of the ministry that I would have loved to have helped. I don't know if I could have, but I would have tried. But they didn't want my input. And I've got plenty of people who want my input, so I'm not on a poor me thing. I fear for them. I know the blessings of God in my life. This book and the old men who loved this book, who guided me, that's where it all lies. It's not in my great anything. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And the Bible is filled with scripture talking about listening to counsel, and filled with scripture listening to the older men and wise men. Lot, what was Lot thinking? Moving down to Sodom when he could have stayed with Abraham. What a destiny-making difference. What a tragic difference was made in his life. And as we get older, we still have a need for counsel. And whether it be getting estate planning or medical or ministry, the people who are in the ministry, people in our church who got saved in our church and grew and began serving in our church, and then they moved somewhere, and they're attending occasionally a church that doesn't do anything. There's no ministry. I just got a text recently from someone that's elsewhere now, and they said, "Well, I just really remember I loved being able to work with the children in the children's ministry, and they were good workers, and but these dear people end up in places where they're not serving, and they're not bad people. They picked up something because of how it feels, looks, or whatever. But I just feel bad because some great workers stepped into retirement. There's no retirement from the work of God. You may not be able to do as much, or may not be able to do the same thing, but as we get older, my dad was involved in choir and ministries in our church and rest home ministries until the week he went to heaven, and in his late 70s. What a privilege that we can serve the King. And I just want to encourage you, nobody stays in athletics without a coach. And no one in the ministry is going to stay on track without someone helping keep them on track. And again, for me, there's an awful lot of it's digital, it's online, because the people I want to follow are in heaven. But I listen to them. I'm going to say every day I'm listening to a dead preacher. And I need their impact, influence. I need their world to impact my world. And I want to encourage you today. Counsel is a good thing. Get good advice, and be guarded. And I don't care if it's marriage or ministry or finances. I'm not going to give you advice on finances. I might point you to somebody who could. There are a lot of things I don't want to venture into at all. I'm just here by the grace of God. But I want to encourage you. Good advice, wise counsel, listen to the gray heads, and find those seasoned veterans who have stayed on track, and make them your North Star.